Welcome to Prospecting Pros. I'm your host, John Carsant, and in each episode, we're going to be interviewing sales and revenue leaders to learn more about their path to success and what they're seeing in the market today. My goal is to plant seeds and give you new ideas on how to think differently about sales development. Hopefully, our conversations will help you break through the noise and improve your results. So, let's get into this week's episode.
All right, we are live. We have Patrick Joyce here joining us for our first episode. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
All right, let's dig in. Let's learn a little bit more about you. Tell us a little bit about your background, your work experience, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I have, like a lot of people do, an interesting path that led me towards sales. I could probably take half an hour to explain every hill and valley that happened. But like the quick and dirty version is I started out, I was a high school math teacher. When I got out of school, I finished college with a math degree, really liked explaining stuff in front of the room, was like often helping my peers, so I thought it would be a good career path for me. And then I got into teaching, and it was a nightmare. I was not a good teacher. It was very difficult. I was good at explaining stuff, but keeping track of everybody's papers and just keeping after people that, to make classroom management is the industry term, was really difficult for me. And it really, I noticed that when I met my wife, she's a really good teacher. I went and observed one of her classes when we first met, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is not what I'm doing.
Were you both teachers at the time when you met?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was her first year teaching, and I had already been there for a couple of years. So I did that for 4 years. I taught high school math, and then wanted to break into the tech industry one way or another. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. So with the math background, I started working on actuary exams. And actuaries do risk management for insurance companies. They do like really fancy statistics for insurance companies. So I got one of those exams done and got a job at a group health brokerage as an analyst. And I was like helping the brokers create proposals, lining up all the different health plans. And I sat next to a guy that was an underwriter that was in the career path that I wanted to go down. But then I very quickly figured out that the brokers were making a lot of money. Like they're like the salespeople for the insurance companies. And they're selling like these huge group health packages to fast food chains and just massive deals. I remember talking to a few of them and I was like, man, this guy is a boat and there's no way that he could do what I'm doing, and I think I could definitely do what he's doing. So I started asking around, like, how do I get into this? Like, how do I get your job? Was my question. As they were like coming around to train me, I was like interviewing them on how do I get your job? And the one thing that everybody said was like, you got to get good at cold calling. So you got to cut your teeth on the phones. Figure out how to do phone calls. So I started a little side hustle selling life insurance. There's a bunch of agencies that will basically put anybody on that's willing to do it. And it was super miserable. I was calling on 4-year-old mortgage protection leads. So when somebody buys a house, the insurance company sends them a piece of paper that says, hey, if you were to die, would your spouse be able to cover your mortgage? If no, fill out this form and we'll send you an application for life insurance. Which is, in theory, like those should be pretty good leads, but not from 4 years ago. Like every insurance agent in Seattle had called them again and again. So it was like just getting hung up on over and over again. So that's how I learned how to set appointments in that setting. And then I was like, okay, this is way too hard to break into. Like insurance is very slow moving. It's an old industry. So I wanted to get into tech and I applied for 2 SDR jobs and I got one of them. And then because I was already really good at setting appointments, I did really well, like right away.
And with the insurance industry, it built up your tolerance to rejection pretty early.
Yeah, and I was super hungry for it. Like I'm from Boston, I'm from the East Coast, hard-nosed, and I was in Seattle, which is like a lot softer. Like the tech community in Seattle is a lot softer. So I had like more of an edge. Like I was just like crushing phone calls. And like the people around me were looking at me like, dude, how are you doing this? And I'm like, I don't know. You just gotta pound the phone. So I did pretty well doing that. I bounced around a little bit at a few different companies. Like over the course of 3 years, I worked at 3 different startups. One of them was a Series D company that got acquired, and then the other 2 were fairly early stage. So I got a lot of experience there. And the last one of those was an enterprise. I was on an enterprise sales team. So I was supporting 5 account directors selling to literally the biggest companies in the world, like Fortune 50. It was JP Morgan Chase and Capital One and eBay. Those were the accounts that I was trying to prospect for my team. So in that setting, I had hired myself a coach, somebody that had been there before, that had done it, skilled up a little bit there, and then he actually put me on to my consulting career. So I started freelancing. Because I had experience both at early stage companies and at enterprise companies, it gave me a pretty good pedigree for the consulting work, which then led me down this path of working for agencies. And then a few jobs later, I came across you guys.
So it sounds like a combination of different experiences, upskilling in a sense, targeting different industries, learning rejection, learning how to sell, got you to the point where you are today. And so tell us about, I guess, your main roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, so at Level Up, my title is, what is my title? Global Head of Accounts and Strategy. And my 2 main charters are managing the SDR team and then supporting our CSMs. So account management, client relations, and strategy for all the customers that we have.
On this podcast, we're going to dive into different techniques around sales, lead generation, tactics, things like that. Hopefully the audience can take away some nuggets here. But SDRs are a big topic, and that has to do with all the things I just mentioned. Tell me a little bit about how many SDRs are you managing, and then what are some of the challenges in managing SDRs, and then what are some of the benefits of having SDRs in-house? Like, why would someone want to hire an SDR?
So our team is 25 SDRs right now, and it's a big team because we have a lot of clients, so we're supporting many different clients. I think 25 is a really big number unless you're at like a 1,000-person product company or something like that, but for an agency, it's fairly normal. One of the hard parts about managing SDRs is that being an SDR is very difficult. It is not an easy job. It's not like you show up and you do what you're supposed to do and you're successful. You are facing rejection 97% of the time. And like staying motivated through that and finding somebody that has the right DNA to be able to do that, I think is, I don't know, one of the more challenging parts of it.
I agree. It's quite challenging. I think that's also why there's lots of turnover. There's not many people that want to be SDRs forever. So they're either looking to move on and get promoted, or they don't make it. When you're hiring or you're training, is there anything you look for to get a sense of whether or not they have that DNA or not?
Yeah, I look for grit more than experience or like, proven success. I'm looking for overcoming adversity in different areas of their life. So for example, the insurance thing was tough for me also, but even before that, I had to work my way through the end of college. So I was working with my brother on a garbage truck from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then going to school at night for the last year trying to finish. So that was like super difficult, and getting on the phone seemed like it was easy in comparison. It was like, man, I've been through so much. This is a cakewalk. Those are the kinds of stories that I look for from people. Like whenever I'm interviewing, I always double, triple click on that particular point. Tell me about a time where it was rough for you and you were able to overcome it. And if they have trouble coming up with more than one example, going deep on one really good story, it gives me an inclination that it might not be a good fit for you, and that's fine.
I know a lot of organizations too, even when they do find an SDR they like, they have trouble retaining them. Why do you think that is? Why do you think these organizations are just having such a hard time keeping good SDRs on top of finding them?
Well, a lot of it is that one of the main reasons people do the job is so they can get a different job. Everybody wants, to be like the big winner, tech sales guy, closing $2 million a year and taking home huge commission checks. And you don't really do that as an SDR, but it is like a stepping stone to get to that point in your career. I went a different route. Like when I got to my first SDR job, I looked around and I was like, man, nobody in the building wants to do this job. This is the hardest thing there. If I can just specialize in this, I'll probably never be out of work. And that turned out to be a pretty good bet. But that's not the direction that most people go in. Most people are just trying to get to the next stage in their career.
Yeah, it's true.
So you're managing a handful of SDRs, 25. It's a lot. And You mentioned it's a challenge, right? It's a challenging job. What do you do to motivate people to keep them going or help them achieve their goal? Is there anything you can reflect on or any tactics that you use to help keep the SDRs motivated
Yeah,
and not burn out?
one of the things we do is the team competition. So we have the 25 reps broken into 4 teams and tally how many meetings each of the teams got week over week, and they get a bonus. Whoever wins the weekly competition or the monthly competition gets a bonus. So that's one of the things to just keep people motivated. So, all right, let me go book a bunch of meetings. The other thing is camaraderie amongst the reps. So we have that Slack channel where somebody books a meeting and they put it in there and everybody cheers for them. They're getting like emojis and gifts and people are getting jazzed on it. And it does feel really good when you book a meeting. It's tough when you're like, you've been calling for 2 weeks and you haven't booked anything. That feels like garbage. But when you do get one, that one meeting could keep you going for the rest of the day. So I think part of it too is recognizing that and moving the pieces around on the board in such a way that everybody has a chance to get something that they can have a good handle on. Putting people in a position where they can be successful, like an industry that they're comfortable with, or something that they've worked with before, or something they're good at talking about, or even just like something that's easy to set if they've been on a couple of hard accounts. Yeah, those are the things I think about.
To add on to that, I think another cool thing so before all these fancy dialers came out, I worked at a company when I was doing cold calling, and we would have a Slack huddle and everyone would join and you could listen to each other call. And now they have the sales floor and a lot of tools like Orem, shout out Orem, where you can actually live listen and you can hear each other. And I think to your point is you can pick up on things that your teammates are doing and you can start implementing that with your clients. And so it's nice to see if you had a few down days to see your coworker have some success, listen in on how they did it and then implement it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think another big thing, just for like improvement as a rep, like whenever I listen to my own calls, I always find something that I could have done better. So I think that's really important for reps to do is to self-evaluate. Like, yes, you're going to have a one-to-one with your manager or like your team lead or whatever, and you're going to review some calls, but you should just do it on your own anyway. Like at the end of the day, if you had a call that like just didn't quite get there and you feel like you could have got it, just go back and listen to it again.
And also just overthinking the calls too, you know, trying to go down a million different roads on a call and handle 20 million different objections. I know a lot of companies, you know, when they hire SDRs, they want them to essentially be account executives on the phone and do discovery. You know, how do you typically handle that when an SDR feels like they're not doing enough or doing too little?
The goal that the SDR is trying to accomplish is to get to a meeting. So let's just simplify the process. Like you don't have to sell the whole thing. You just need to find out if there's enough interest for the person to take a little bit of time at a later date. And once you find that, you should stop talking. Put the meeting on the calendar and get off the phone. That's one of the things that I've coached time and time again here is, man, like you had the interest right there and then you go on and keep explaining the product. Like you don't need to say anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The the discovery.
Yeah.
I think a lot of sales teams and SDRs, even sales leaders, because we talk to a lot of them, is they expect that first call to always turn into a meeting. And I think it's important to realize it's not always going to be first time success, right? You're not always going to hit a home run to start. It may take a follow-up call, a text message, or a follow-up email. Sometimes you got to use your gut instinct, or hey, are they just trying to get you off the phone? But I found in my experiences, just listening to what they said, hey, follow up with me next week. And if you just listen, you don't just follow up with them the next day. And a lot of the times they're pretty reasonable. I think you guys know, I used to play tennis, and there's something called a passing shot when someone's at net and you're at the baseline. And one thing one of my coaches said is you have to hit a two-step passing shot. You don't hit a winner at the first one. You get the first one down at their feet so they pop it up so you have a better chance the next time to hit the ideal shot. And so I use the analogy when you're making calls. It's not like it's always going to be a set meeting. Now, hopefully it is, right? That's the goal. But sometimes you need to follow up with them, shoot them a text message, things like that. I found a lot of success doing that in my experience.
Yeah, the hard part about outbound in general is that it is like a war of attention. There's so many things trying to get people's attention, and like an outbound sales agent is probably like the last one on everybody's list that they want to pay attention to. So I think just, I don't know, having some awareness around that, and playing the game in such a way that you're trying to get the person's attention and realizing when you have it and when you don't.
And how much of a factor do you think it plays? So you're reaching out to people, they have no idea who you are. They may or may not have a need for what you're offering, but that they know your company when you say that name. How much of a factor does that play into the success, or not so much?
This episode is sponsored by Level Up Leads, a B2B sales development and appointment setting agency. Companies always need pipeline, but they oftentimes don't want to hire SDRs internally. The whole process is risky and expensive. You've got hiring costs, onboarding, training, additional spend on your tech stack, a few months to ramp up. And with that being said, SDRs are a high turnover position, and the person you hire might not necessarily work out, so you need to start all over again. That's why companies outsource this. Level Up Leads allocates a team of people, their tech stack, so you can onboard and launch your campaigns in about a week. They set qualified meetings in your calendar so your team has more selling opportunities. Visit levelupleads.io today to learn more. All right, now back to the show.
It's huge. It's so much. So I've done both. I've worked for companies that were well known in the industry, and I've worked for companies that nobody knew who they were, and it's night and day. It's completely different. Like when you have brand recognition. So I always take like the stuff that you see on LinkedIn from like the big popular companies, like billion-dollar valuation companies, like posting advice on LinkedIn. I'm like, yeah, man, but you work for Gong.
Yeah.
Nothing against the Gong reps. Like, I think what they do from a marketing standpoint is brilliant. Like, they should be out there. They should be doing the stuff. But if you're a sales rep and you work for a seed round startup that has no customers, it's like the same rules do not apply.
Yeah, having that brand recognition, and just that the street cred where people recognize the name, it just allows you to get off that introduction to a call so much smoother compared to, hey, I'm from this local cybersecurity firm that does consultation. It's just they're like, who and why would I need this? Whereas Gong is, you go in with just that social proof immediately.
Yeah, like they had a Super Bowl commercial.
They did. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
It ran regionally, so it like only ran in San Francisco, but they had a legitimate Super Bowl ad.
We should take a Super Bowl out. Why not?
Yeah, one day.
There's something that what I see with SDRs too is not everybody is going to have killer months, right? And like in baseball, you hit a slump. You're batting 300, and then all of a sudden the next month you're batting like 150. How important is that mental aspect of getting out of the slumps and just like pushing through and performing?
It's everything. I think in the agency context, sometimes it's a matter of knowing that, man, the context changes all the time. So like, I only have to do this for a couple more weeks or another month or two or whatever. Like, I just need to get through this and I'll get to something else. But if you don't work for an agency, you work for a product company, you're like not finding success, chances are like you're going to be on a PIP pretty soon. You're not going to have a job. You're going to be looking for another job, right? The lessons learned there in terms of why was I having a hard time? Being able to analyze that. For example, you work for a company that didn't have great product market fit. Start looking for companies where you feel like are selling really well, that have a lot of traction in the industry, and apply for those jobs. Right? Put yourself in a position to succeed.
And, you bring up a PIP. That's always something that I know for HR purposes, big corporations, they have to do it for their paper trail, right? But honestly, if you're truly looking to motivate someone, I almost wonder if it's counterproductive instead of using that opportunity to build rapport with the SDR and motivate them through accountability just between you and the SDR.
I don't really believe in the PIP. The PIP is a guillotine. The PIP means I'm getting fired soon. It's going to be like really hard to do whatever the thing is. As far as the connecting and motivating people, it's something I picked up from teaching. The more that you can connect with the person and show them that you understand their perspective. So I'm talking about like my direct reports. Same thing when I was a teacher, it was my students. Understanding their worldview and like how, I don't know, like what problems in their life they're facing. The more you can show them that you understand that opens the door for trust. Once you have that established, it's really hard to shake it loose. and you can get a lot out of people that way. I was teaching literally gang members in a low-income district just outside of Boston. So I had to find creative ways to like break through to people, which actually translates pretty well to managing cold callers.
When I used to be a tennis coach, there's another thing. There's every tennis lesson is supposed to have three things. It's fun, fitness, and knowledge. But every person wanted more of some than the other. And so it's always like you had to either ask or you had to feel it out what they actually wanted. Some people just wanted to run around and get a good, they didn't care about the knowledge so much. And I think that's also when you're selling to people, you need to understand what do they care about. And so if you can understand the persona, the types of things that fall under their responsibility, you'll be able to get through to them, I think, a lot easier.
And that's just like in sales too. Is what they teach us in sales is really find out what the person cares most about, and don't just like tech dump or product dump on them. Is find out what they care about, focus on that, and adapt yourself to them, and you'll be more successful. So it obviously would translate into the SDR role as well.
Let's talk about tools and technology a little bit, right? You see stuff on LinkedIn. People are throwing around the latest and greatest tools. How important is, whether it be the technology such as a dialer or email automation platform versus the data, or is it just, does a lot of it just come down to the SDR and how they can navigate conversations? And what has your experience been, Patrick, with the balance between tech stack and the SDRs?
I'll start by saying this. The way that I was trained is that you should be able to do this job with a two-way radio and a pencil. Like low tech, figure out what would you need to do in that scenario, and then build the tech around that. So the tech was made for the salesperson and their process, not the other way around. Trying to retrofit your process into the tech that's available, I think, is a mistake or can be a red herring. That said, at an agency like ours, we have such high call volumes. The parallel dialer is completely necessary. We wouldn't even there wouldn't be enough time in the day to do what we do without some cool piece of technology like that. And I also think that the list is the strategy. So 80% or more of the outcome is a result of the people that you were targeting. It's not necessarily about turning a no into a yes. It's about finding the yeses amongst the no's.
Does that mean like kind of like the list lines up with the strategy and the script in a sense, right? You have the right persona with the right talk track. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like when I say the list is the strategy, when you put the list together, you should have a really good idea of why you are reaching out to the people that are on that list. So there's some problem that you think that those people have that you can solve in a better way than what they're doing it currently. And that's a really deep kind of nugget there, because that means that you also have to have a really good understanding of how they're addressing the problem, like all the nuances of the problem, and that manifests itself in the list, if that makes any sense.
And how do you feel with some of this like AI technology that is really tripling and quadrupling down on high touch, high personalization?
I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't think it's that good.
It's funny. Me and John were talking about this because, our emails are always full of people pitching different products or services, right? And we open the emails, we read them, but there's never been one that just was so personalized to me and who I am that didn't have a product that I needed. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to take a meeting just because that's personalized.
Yeah.
It's always comes down to, do I need this, and is it going to fix a problem I'm having? Always.
Yeah, back in 2019, 2018-ish, I remember the big wave of personalization at scale where it became find personal interests, and we were doing it by hand back then. We were mining the LinkedIn profile, and trying to find them on Instagram and finding out they're a Chicago Bears fan, and then making an analogy about the quarterback of the Chicago Bears and vision on the field, and that's how much vision. And it just is, there's such a lift there. It could take you 2 hours to write an email, and that doesn't necessarily translate into sales. That doesn't mean that the person has the problem. I think understanding the problem is a lot more than understanding the individual person. Mm-hmm. So I think that the things that people are chasing with AI aren't necessarily the most impactful parts of the process.
Do you think it'll continue to get better with some of these tools over time? Because the biggest name out there right now is Clay, right?
Yeah.
personalization. I think we can all agree we're just not seeing results from email like a few years ago. I remember I used to just crush it on email, close to 20% response rates. It was fire. And that just doesn't happen anymore. So I'm with you. I don't think all this AI personalization, unless you have a really good offer, it changes things. But yeah, and this goes not just for us, but across the board with a lot of our clients are just not seeing the results that it used to. They're just seeing a lot better results from being on the phones and talking to people directly.
Yeah, my thought is AI doesn't really have a place as in terms of replacing an SDR until it can make a phone call really well. And we're like almost there. Like you've seen the demos, but they're like completely like canned and scripted with the AI that's calling people. I think if it's something routine like setting an appointment or like an insurance company or something, it could make sense. But until the AI can literally have like a full conversation with somebody and you weren't able to tell it was a computer, which I think will happen. I don't know, maybe 10 years from now. I don't know. I feel like that technology is close to us, but that would be a game changer, I think.
What do you feel like SDRs should continue to hone in on in terms of skill development as we move forward in 2025? Is what comes to mind?
The things that computers are not good at, being a human. You can have you can do your personalization via Clay and use ChatGPT and pull the whatever. But if you're a VP of sales and you get a lot of outreach, it's pretty transparent. That's what the person is doing when you get that email, which sort of defeats the purpose. So it's almost like I've had a lot of success, even in the enterprise space, sending like one-line emails that were clearly written by a human, like a lowercase subject line and misspelled thanks at the end of the email and then left it that way, just so that it
I
looks
used to
like
do that.
a human did it. Yeah.
It worked. I stopped doing it after a while, but you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Another thing I saw was there was an SDR that reached out to me. I had made a post on LinkedIn about Indian food or something like that, and she messaged me and started chatting me up about what kind of Indian food I liked, and then was like, "Hey, by the way, do you have any interest in XYZ?" And I'm compelled to answer at that point because we're like engaged in a real human conversation beforehand. So I think like doubling down on that kind of stuff, like what is the human element? What are the things that computers are not good at? Making phone calls, building
Yeah,
relationships, right?
yeah, it's a good
And
point.
I think that's really for an SDR, for personal success is find what works for you, see how you can make it more efficient at scale without, adding on unnecessary technology or, artificial intelligence messaging, and really focus on your prospects' issues. Is if you can zone in on their issues, right? You're going to be more successful as an SDR.
Yeah, 100%. People use video a bunch. That's a good way to come across as a human. Voice notes I like on LinkedIn because
Hmm.
it's hard for a computer to leave a voice note. Like you had to have done it.
Mhm.
However, if you're reading a marketing script in your voice note, that is not a human activity. That a computer could have done that.
And people can tell when you're reading something. It's
Yeah.
so obvious.
I think another thing that gets overlooked in any SDRs out there listening is you always be trying new things or understand where your prospects, what channels are working best. And I'll use an example. I had a meeting that was set up for me 6 months ago. And shortly after, he no-showed the meeting, then I found out he's no longer working there. But I knew there was interest. So I connected with the CEO. He accepted immediately, sent him a few messages, no response. So I followed up with him about once a week, once every 2 weeks. I had 6 no's, 6 messages with no response. I sent him an email. He immediately responded to my LinkedIn message that day. And so I think it's just like trying to understand what channels are working best. And if they're not, then try something else. Or like text messages will work really well. I wouldn't cold text messages, it's actually illegal. But once you get into conversation and they know who you are, then I think text is also a really good avenue.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think SMS is huge, especially mid funnel. And the discovery call. Hey, is it okay if I shoot you a text for an update midweek so we can skip a meeting?
and to close my story, I booked a meeting with the CEO. So I just want to say that he didn't just respond. He ended up booking a meeting, so it was all worth it.
Yeah, but did you get him
Okay,
to sign a contract though? That's the key.
the meeting's tomorrow, so we'll see.
Oh, if this is recent. Oh, shit.
Yeah. Okay, I have two more questions. Patrick, looking back on your career, like what's one or two things you wish you started doing sooner?
I wish I started writing sooner, documenting my journey, thinking about like writing down, so almost like journaling, like what was my perspective at the time? Because it's hard to go back and think about it now. And it's not so that I could put it out as content, but so that I could help address the people that are going through the same thing now, like people that are earlier in their career. I wish I had started doing that sooner. I was semi-active on social media with the brand building kind of thing, but I think I could have gone a little bit deeper there sooner. It Networking has been super good for my career. It's been actually everything. Just
That's how we
getting
met.
out there. Yeah, exactly. Finding different people to work with, building a reputation that way. All those things have been really impactful.
I really like your first answer. Yeah, because it's hard to know what your headspace was and what the market was like and what you were going through 3 years ago. It's hard to remember those types of things.
Yep.
Okay, and my last question here is, let's say you're given a budget to make math simple. Let's say you're given $100 and you can split that $100 up for marketing and sales. How do you split up your budget, whether it be conferences or SDR, or what channels are you doing? What channels are you putting your budget towards in 2025?
$100 is going to take us very far.
I know, for the simplicity of it.
Yeah. For a percentage, right? What company is it for? Level Up? I think the context matters.
Yeah, that's a good point. But let's say it's for your current role to make it easy. You know,
For us, I would probably put $90 into marketing and $10 into sales, because you guys can just do the sales and we just need more customers, right? If I was to push the chips in one direction or the other, it'd be like, get our name out there and get people to know, hey, if you need a good calling shop, Level Up, those are the guys.
let's just, for the audience sake, let's break up, what does marketing look like? So is that paid listings like Clutch? Is that PPC? Is that SEO? How would you, or is it conferences? That could be another one. What do you think would be a good use of that 90%?
I've done the conferences a bunch. I haven't had a ton of success in building pipeline based on the conferences, but it's also been really good for networking. For me personally, has been more of a long play. I think face-to-face, in-person interactions are like number one, and then it's a really far way down to the next best thing, which is a phone call. The more face-to-face interaction you can have, the better. But again, for building pipeline, like I haven't seen a ton come out of that. I think publishing content, like video content, podcast content, like we're doing now, interview a customer, put a testimonial out there, like all that kind of stuff. Like the way that people consume on social media, I think is like where you're going to have the biggest reach. It used to be Google AdWords, and you could just run an AdWords campaign and you get a bunch of clicks, but I don't think people are doing it as much anymore.
Awesome, Patrick. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some tips around hiring, training SDRs, some sales and lead generation tactics. So thanks for joining us, and until next time.